It's ethics in this edition of Audit Simplified. And, well, keep listening right till the end, because I'm going to be telling you about 2 dilemmas that students put me in every single exam sitting. Let's get cracking. Hi everyone, and welcome to Audit Simplified. In this edition, we are talking about ethics, a key exam topic across all accountancy exams, but particularly in auditing exams, really, really important. And I'm going to be giving you lots and lots of insight into how ethics is examined within audit exams. And as always, I'm joined by Hannah for this podcast. Hannah, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, Ben. Yes, hello, everyone. I'm going to be playing the role of the student, as always, and asking Ben some interesting questions. And yeah, looking forward to this topic on ethics, because it's one that's very close to my heart.
Awesome. What's my first question, Hannah?
What do we mean by ethics?
Well, okay, that is a big question. It is, in the context of exams, it's doing the right thing, right? It's being both kind of following the rules, but not just the written rules, it's the spirit of them. So ethics in the ACCA syllabus in every exam is principles based. It isn't telling you what you should do in every single situation. And because otherwise they'd have to think of every situation. It's giving you a broad set of almost moral principles by which you should judge every situation, giving you the tools by which you can solve an ethical dilemma rather than telling you what the answer is to every ethical dilemma.
Excellent. And in an audit exam, how is this topic commonly tested? Yeah,
there will be, well, it depends on the level of audit exam, but advanced auditing, where I specialise, it won't be a really obvious situation. Right, so it won't be that a company is a manufacturer and they make really small parts, and so they use children in the manufacturing process because their little hands and little fingers are so useful for manufacturing these small parts. Right? It won't be a situation like that because that's so obvious. Yeah, it's illegal and immoral to be employing child labour, therefore it's wrong. It won't be so clear cut. The situation will be much more subtle, where there isn't necessarily a right answer, but it's an opportunity for you to show your thinking. So an example dilemma might be that the company has been approached by some of its customers, and the customers are saying, our budget year is coming to an end. We're coming to the end of our financial year, and we've got some unused budget. So can you bill us in advance for a lot of services or products that actually we're going to use next year? We're going to deliver next year. So can you bill us in advance so we can use up our budget? And the dilemma would be, well, is that okay? Should we do that? And you in the exam might go, well, I don't know what the harm is really. Is that okay? But you have to discuss your thinking before coming to a conclusion. And there quite often isn't a correct answer. You could say yes or no, as long as you explain your thinking clearly.
One thing that I always found difficult when I was doing these types of exams was the difference between advocacy and management threat. Could you tell us a little bit about those 2 threats in particular?
Sure. Well, sort of taking a step back, right? So within the ethics syllabus, right, you've got fundamental ethical principles like professional behaviour, professional competence. If you've studied any ACCA exams, you'll be aware of these fundamental ethical principles. And then you've got threats to objectivity, things that might cause someone to be biased. And what Hannah's just asked about there, which was advocacy threat. And what was the other one, Hannah?
Management.
And management threat. Those are 2 things that could cause you to lack objectivity. And we're going to pretend, we'll say we're a consultant or we're an auditor for the purposes of this. So advocacy threat, that is where you are promoting the client in some way. So you might be seen to not be objective, to be biased because you are promoting the client. It might be something like the client is applying for a bank loan and you are being asked to give an opinion to verify how good their forecasts are. You know, are their forecasts reasonable to support that bank loan application? And there's an advocacy threat because we're promoting the client to the bank to try and get the bank to issue the loan. And actually, we might want the bank to issue the loan because our client then has a lot of money that they might then spend with us. So advocacy is promoting us to a third party, promoting the client to a third party. And management threat is where the lines are blurred between the external consultant or the auditor and the company. So it's things like you're taking decisions on management's behalf. They're asking you for some advice on, how do we account for something? Some technical financial reporting. Now we can give advice about these are what the rules are, but it has to be over to management to make the decision about how to account for something because it's their company, their accounts. However, if we know that the management doesn't have the knowledge and expertise, and we say this is how we think you should account for something, effectively, the auditor or the external consultant is making the decision for management, and therefore they're not objective, they're not unbiased because they're actually acting as management.
Thanks for clearing that up for me, Ben. Always found that difficult. So, can ethics come up in literally any question in the exam?
Totally. So within advanced auditing at the ACCA exam, it typically comes up in question 1, which is the planning question. You very often get a sort of 10-mark question that is focused on a classic ethical dilemma. The company, something slightly dodgy is happening at the business and you've got to advise on it and talk about the impact on your audit. So that's a classic way it comes up. But very often, it will be within the other questions of the exam as well. They try and build it into every single question. So if you're one question type that happens a lot in AAA is that you are assessing the quality of an audit. How well was this audit performed? So we're at the audit's been done and we're reviewing it. And there could be some ethical challenges that took place within that audit. It might be that it was a super, super important client to us. Our biggest client, they make up 30% of our revenue, let's say, and we're super dependent on them. And that created a self-interest threat. We're so reliant on them that we'll allow the client to get away with anything, any dodgy behavior, because we can't afford to lose that work. And that could have impacted the quality of the audit. So you would see it built into lots and lots of different exam questions. It often doesn't actually say, this is an ethics question, or highlight the fact that you need to talk about ethical stuff. You've got to be on the front foot a little bit and be watching out for situations where you can turn it into an ethical issue and explain that issue and talk about how to deal with it, because there's marks for it.
Okay, that is tricky. So what do really excellent students do when they're answering an ethics question? How can you do really well in ethics?
Okay, the thing that great students do is they forget about the textbook. So it's not about writing out a pre-learned definition of self-interest threat or self-review threat or confidentiality. That goes out the window. What the good student does is starts with the scenario, starts with the facts they're given in the scenario, and then explains how that leads to a self-interest threat or a self-review threat or whatever it is. So it's very much, they start with the scenario and write a tailored answer and kind of turn it into ethics, rather than starting with the textbook and going, I'll just write what I've pre-learned. In an advanced exam, which this one, the one I specialize in, you've got to realize there's very few marks for showing you've memorized the textbook. That is a lower level skill. Right? An advanced skill is for you to understand the textbook and be able to apply it to an unusual situation. So that's the better students start with the scenario and write a tailored explanation as to why it's an ethical matter, rather than starting with the...
Are there any other sort of classic mistakes or pitfalls when it comes to answering these types of questions?
Yeah, very much so. So something that less strong students often do is go, it's ethics, right? Now, I know that there are these fundamental ethical principles like professional behavior, professional competence, objectivity, confidentiality, integrity, right? Those are my 5 fundamental ethical principles. So what I'll try to do in every ethics question is try and write about all 5 of those. Because by writing about all 5, there must be at least one of them in there, probably 2, maybe even 3. So by writing about all 5, I'll cover all bases and surely I'll score marks. And what they do is waste an awful lot of time because confidentiality or objectivity might not be relevant in this particular question. And what they're saying to the marker is, I don't really know what I'm doing. I have a set approach that I will follow no matter what your requirement is or whatever your scenario is. And that approach does not work in AAA. So don't go for that. I'm going to write about all of the principles or all of the threats to objectivity. It doesn't work. You have to respond to the.
Looking at your career, can you give us any kind of real life ethical dilemma that you've been in, maybe when you were a trainee or slightly later in life, just to give us sort of a practical real world experience that you've been through yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I actually face an ethical dilemma. I've got two actually that I face regularly. One is I get approached by students who ask me to sit the exam on their behalf, and will pay me to do it.
Wow.
Yeah. And I often get offered quite a lot of money to do that. And it's a brilliant money spinner for me, Hannah. That's how I can afford my holidays and my kitchen, because I often sit the exam. I'm obviously joking, right? So I always say no, but you'd be amazed how often I get asked to do that. And the other one is where I get approached by a student who wants to come on my course, but they are struggling financially or they can't afford to come on the course. And they'll tell me their backstory, and my courses are expensive, right? They're expensive for a reason, because you get a lot of personal attention from me, and I'm very highly skilled and experienced in what I do. My time isn't cheap. My courses are great, but you get a lot of Ben, and Ben is expensive. I mean, there's a reason I'm expensive. But I get a lot of students saying, can I come on your course? I can only afford to pay this amount of money. And it's a lot less than what the course actually costs. So I always have that kind of, I'd love to help this person. But if I say, oh yeah, you can come on my course for a much reduced price, that helps that person. But it also would really annoy all of the people that have paid full price. It's not fair on them, I don't think. And if I do it for one person who gets in touch and tells me their story, and I will have sympathy, I will. If I then say yes to them, I kind of have to say yes to the next person who tells me something similar. And then all of a sudden, my course goes from being super value add because I am giving lots of personal attention to students, up to I've got tons of students and I can't help them as well. So everyone loses. So what I do to deal with that dilemma, Hannah, is I give away a lot for free. So I say to that student, look, I know you can't, it is expensive, and I realize that. And what I do is I give away loads of stuff on my YouTube channel, on my podcast. If you go on my website, there's always tons of free content that I'm giving to try to help the student in your situation. So you can't come on my course for free, but I'm giving you a lot for free anyway. So hopefully that's helpful. And that does, I get a lot of really positive feedback from students who can't afford my course, that actually they find the free stuff really, really helpful. And they'll often pass because of it.
They are perfect examples. Just going back to the first one, what do you say to those students who have asked you to sit the exam for them? What do you say?
Well, firstly, I always ask how much they're offering to pay me, because I'm just interested to know, what am I worth? And then I say to them, look, I am actually duty bound here to report this to ACCA, because you are contravening their ethical principles. So I'm going to assume that. So depending on how much the student pushes it, I do report it to ACCA, because I kind of play it with a straight bat. But I give the student an opportunity to kind of backtrack and go, no, I was just testing you out, Ben. I was joking here. So I kind of give them an opportunity to do the right thing themselves. But if they don't, then I am duty bound to report it to ACCA.
So you've chosen ethical principles over monetary gain there, which is something that will come up a lot in people's career, I'm sure.
Indeed.
So, final question. What is your number one piece of advice for an ethical question?
Yeah, don't jump straight to the conclusion. So what often happens in a student's answer is it's a complicated, subtle ethical scenario, and they'll go, the answer's this. And that will be worth very little credit. What the marks are for explaining how you get to that answer. So chew the fat. Discuss. If it says discuss, and it often will be discuss, argue one side, argue the other. Try and think of other perspectives, other stakeholder perspectives, so that instead of just going, it's wrong, don't do it, or it's fine, do it, you have to go, well, this is a reason why it's okay. This is a reason it's not. This is another reason it's okay. Here's another. And you have a rounded discussion that leads you to your conclusion saying, yes, it's fine, or no, it's not. But don't go straight in with that conclusion, because otherwise you really restrict the number of marks. The marks really are for the chat, the discussion. So make sure you spend time there.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Ben.